the most common mindset I've run into all over the planet after all these decades is, it's never going to happen to me. Okay, so if you believe it's never going to happen to you, and when it does, that's T-bone. I mean, you just got blindsided because, you didn't even think the possibility was there. If you don't accept that level of responsibility and that bad things do happen to good people and it could happen to you, it's your responsibility. That's your baseline.
Welcome to another episode of Liberating Humanity. I'm Paul Hutchinson, and I'm extremely excited about our guest today. Mr. Steve Tarani flew in from Phoenix, Arizona, just this morning to spend all day today in not only recording this podcast, but putting together some information and some tools that we're using in the schools to keep children safe. We're using it in governments where we can create situational awareness of different trafficking situations, et cetera, there. I've spoken many times before about how when we're doing the undercover work and finding these children, keeping the team safe is less about the defense skills that we all learned, and it's more about being aware of the situations, aware of what's going on. And you as a parent can learn more from this episode in ways to keep your children safe and to make your life as a whole more effective by being aware of what's going on. So, Steve, thank you for joining me today.
Paul, thanks for having me on board.
So I'm going to brag about you for a second, so just so you guys know how freaking amazing Steve is. So Steve has trained for almost 40 years, right? 37. You're like, I'm not quite that old. It's pretty close. 37 years. You have trained CIA, FBI, in fact, pretty much every three-letter agency, including the Secret Service, right? The real version. I don't know the new ones.
Every three-letter agency you can think of with a vowel.
Absolutely. So train them on all kinds of things, being safe out in the field, situational awareness, et cetera. Steve and I first met many, many years ago. I was taking an edged weapons training course. This was a 2-day, very intensive edged weapons. Steve is one of the best edged weapons trainers in the world. He's trained all over the world. In fact, he's received his training and he's trained with some of the top level people in Japan and Indonesia, everywhere on hand-to-hand combat, situational awareness, et cetera. But I started our relationship in edged weapons, knowing how to handle a knife, knowing how to defend against a knife, et cetera. You've trained in gun training, but your specialty is in ensuring that somebody doesn't have to get to that point of using knives, of using guns, of using your self-defense skills to keep yourself saf, correct?
Yes, sir.
Did I do a good job?
It was superb. Well done.
All right. So I want to start. You're wearing your pre-fence shirt. You have a lot of courses, a lot of things that we actually have on the Liberating Humanity website of tools that parents can use to keep their family safe, et cetera. So let's start just basic on the definition of situational awareness. Tell me what that is and kind of a broad overview of what we'll be talking about today.
Sure. So it's a term that is applied to any person that's in an environment where they need to keep their wits about them, to be aware of what's going on. And as the environment change and the dynamics of that environment change, so does your awareness need to be commensurate with that and keep up with what's going on. And so the term utilized in military, law enforcement, all throughout the community is situational awareness. Are you aware of the situations as they change around you?
And how would you define, give us an understanding of soft skills versus hard skills?
Sure. In our community, for example, let's say you're in the military or law enforcement, you need to learn how to do such things as hand-to-hand combat, defensive driving, firearms, things like that. And those are all considered hard skills because you need to use your body for that. And if you use your physical body, that introduces the potential for a scale of injury. You can get hurt. Those skills require an initial train up. And then because all hard skills are perishable, you then need what's called in-service training to maintain those physical skills. And those are also utilized as reactive measures. For example, something happens where it requires you to go to self-defense, gun, knife, whatever it may be. That's a reactive response. So the exact opposite of that is, and agents and law enforcement officers, et cetera, need to train in this as well. That's soft skills. Soft skills are those measures that are considered proactive, something that you do prior to needing to be reactive. Soft skills would be, for example, de-escalation, diffusion, situational awareness, things like that. So by applying your soft skills, you decrease, and this is why this is such an important point, by utilizing and applying soft skills, you decrease the probability of ever needing self-defense or hard skills.
Beautiful. And in some of those soft skills, it's not necessarily just, decreasing the energy. In my case, when we were doing undercover work, those soft skills that prevented us from ever having to go to hard skills, in some cases were elevation. For example, I had a situation, we were in Ecuador, and we were following a trafficker down a dark alley. He was showing us where he was keeping his inventory. We're going to geotag the location so the feds could come in and sting the location and where he was keeping the children. And Jimmy and I were walking down this dark alley, and I became very aware. The first thing that hit me was my spidey senses, right? The first thing that hit me was this feeling that something was off. And then I listened, I heard some footsteps behind us. And I turned around, and there were two other traffickers that were following us. Now, these guys, we were waiting at this restaurant and waiting for them. They were supposed to be bringing some of the children so we could verify they had what our boss wanted, et cetera. I had multiple federal officers that were there at the restaurant, that were seated, that were undercover, that were watching us. But I got this text from this other trafficker saying, "Hey, I see you're at this restaurant. The place that we're holding those kids is pretty close. You want to see where they are?" And so I didn't have the ability to let the federal agents know we were going. I just got up with Jimmy and we followed him out and went down this dark alley. And then boom, we've got traffickers behind us, traffickers in front. Dark alley, no federal protection, no knives, no guns, nothing. This is a situation that very easily could have put us in danger physically in many ways. And so I turned around, and what I did, my soft skill was actually escalation at the time. I turned around and I took 2 steps forward, just pure energy confidence, and said, "What the F?" And they said, "What?" I said, "What are you doing?" They said, "What are you doing?" I said, "What does it matter what I'm doing?" I said, "I'm following him. He's going to show me some of his inventory. You guys so far have failed, and it's just that confidence that I had. So again, it wasn't necessarily de-escalation was increasing, but it was making sure that I didn't ever have to go to my hard skills to be able to prevent it. I said, "You guys have failed so far. You told me over an hour ago that you were going to show up at that restaurant with some of the kids. You haven't so far." And then again, just a show of force and energy, I pulled out of my pocket a whole wad of money, just like that. Again, it's this, they don't know what's underneath my fist type of a thing, right? I pull out the money and literally, and we're in this dangerous place in the middle of the alley. I've got traffickers in front, traffickers in back, and I pulled it up and I said, "You want this? You want this?" And one of them said, "Yeah." I said, "It's all yours. This whole thing is yours. But you have to perform. You have to show me what you said you have, and I'll tip you for it. And then there'll be a whole bunch more when my boss is here. But until then, you don't get a penny. So in 15 minutes, I'll be back after I'm finished seeing what he's going to show me. You show up with what you said you had, boom, it's all yours. Until then, we're done, right? Get out of here." But again, it was that confidence that defused the situation so that it never had to get to the point where we had to use hard skills.
That's the exact point of soft skills, is to be able to use it as a tool, a device to solve the problem, solve the tactical problem, not needing to go to guns or anything like that.
Exactly. Let's talk about proactive versus reactive. When you're reacting to something, You've already, you're in a situation where now you have to maybe go to hard skills, or you have to do what I just did there. I was literally having to react to a situation. So talk about, proactive versus reactive.
Sure. So they are both life-saving skills, and they're completely different skill sets. So, for example, most people see physical violence as when it occurs. There's a mugging or an attack or something like that, and you're seeing the physical violence, and so you react to it. The only three reactions there are physically are to get yourself out of there, make flight or take flight, and then you can fight your way out, or you can simply surrender to the situation and freeze. Those are really the only three options reactively to that situation. What most people don't see is physical violence is the tip of the iceberg. Under the iceberg, the biggest piece of the ice are those events which occur leading up to physical violence. And that's where you apply your proactive measures, which are the soft skills that we've been talking about. So reactive measures are physical, they require your body, and they can incur injury. The second skill set, which is the soft skills, is proactive, which will diffuse the events leading up to that. And it doesn't involve your body using your most powerful weapon, which is your mind. And it doesn't need batteries. You don't have to recharge it. Doesn't have to get a license for it. And it's on 24/7.
Awesome. So about what percentage of dangerous situations and hard skill type of reactionary things could be avoided if somebody learned the soft skills, if somebody learned the proactive side?
So if all you are armed with is your hard skills, then that's all you have. Well, if something happens, I'm gonna poke him in the eye, kick him in the groin, something like that. So that's all you have is you only have one. That's 100%. But if you had your training in soft skills and knew, just like the hard skills, knew your techniques, knew how to approach the situation, knew how to solve the problem, you can then reduce your need or potential for hard skills to less than 10%. So I use the term the 90% advantage.
That's wonderful. So you give our listeners just a few different tips, some things, soft skill type things. Whether it's understanding the baseline. In fact, why don't we just start there? Why don't you teach just a basic understanding of what baseline is and how that skill in getting good at that, and it doesn't take years of defense training, right? Literally, just listening to this podcast today can prevent 90% of the dangers for families, for individuals. Over 90%, just understanding some of these basic tools of situational awareness. So talk to me about what baseline is.
Very good. And you made a good point, the difference between a tip and a technique. So tips are roll up your windows, lock your doors. Okay, good. Techniques are such as are applied in preventive defense or prefense, include setting and reading your baseline. So for example, you walk into a coffee shop. What's a common coffee shop around here?
Starbucks.
Starbucks. Okay, yeah. So we'll take a Starbucks. You walk into a Starbucks and you set your baseline. That is, what do you expect to see in that Starbucks? So give me some examples of what you would expect to see in a Starbucks.
Well, you have the barista behind. She's making some coffee. You've got some people that are typing on their computer quietly on the side. You've got some people that are in line that are ordering. Just kind of the hum of typical things that are that you would expect in a restaurant or a coffee shop. Maybe some people talking about business in the corner or whatever.
And then is there music maybe?
Yeah, there might be some soft music going on, and yeah.
And let's say it's we're here in the summer, right? So it's 80 plus degrees, 90 degrees in the summer, and there's music playing, there's people ordering on their phones, that kind of stuff. And that's your baseline. You've just set your expectations of what you expect to see, hear, feel, all that here in this location. Then somebody walks in, it's in the summer, somebody walks in with a heavy jacket, and that person is sweating, and they're looking at the cash register and staring at the security camera, from cash registers to the security camera, and you're looking at that, and is that something that you would expect to see at a Starbucks? Probably not. So that's what we call being an event that's being above the baseline. And it should get your attention, or at least raise your interest, is, why is that person heavily dressed with a bulge in their heavy jacket staring at the cash register and the security camera? Then the next day you go to Starbucks, you walk in, and there's no baristas, no customers, no client. You're the only person. That's an indication that is something that isn't there that should be there, and that's considered below the baseline. So you set your baseline, try and observe things that may be above that baseline or below the baseline, and those are potential threats.
The baseline walking down a dark alley with a trafficker in front of me would be not to have other traffickers behind me following us.
Yes, sir.
Right? That's a baseline nobody wants to be in already, is in the dark alley. But in our situation, that was the baseline, and it changes. You could be in a construction zone, and the noise is a lot higher. So in every situation, the baseline is different.
Exactly.
You have to identify what that looks like, and especially when you've got a large crowd of people. People are moving, and if all of a sudden there's a huge increase in a roar, well, maybe that's because a bunch of people just saw something on a television. And I'm hyper aware of this stuff. I've trained for a lot of years. And so, I'll be in a sports bar or something, or in a restaurant, and all of a sudden, if I hear something that's out of the baseline, if I hear an increase in commotion somewhere, immediately that catches my attention. I'm going up to a yellow in my mind, or an orange in my mind, something higher than just the chill. In fact, I'm always in at least a yellow. I'm never in a white. I'm always making, and we'll talk about the different color codes in a minute, but I'll pay attention. I need to know exactly what's going on there. Most people don't. They're not even paying attention at all. They're just still eating and whatever else. They're not. But immediately when I hear that increase in that baseline, I look over. Oh, somebody just made a goal. It's a soccer game going on. Everybody's super excited about it. We're good. Now I'm fine with that. In fact, at that point, I've increased my baseline. I've realized, okay, there's a soccer game going on. There's going to be some more excitement than what's normally going on. So I'm okay with that. I'm not going to get concerned about that, right? Now that my baseline is higher, if all of a sudden everything went dead silent, now my baseline changed from what my new understanding of it was. Now I'm looking around and I'm saying, okay, why is everybody quiet? Oh, there's a guy over there that's being threatening, that's putting whatever it is. And so paying attention to that it's not going to make you live in fear all the time.
Not at all.
It's simply being aware of what is typical for the environment that you're in and what is not typical.
Exactly. So being able to identify those items that are they an actionable item or are they not? We can talk about that later. But if you can, first, you can't fix a problem you can't see. So if it's something that's above the baseline or below the baseline you set, you're right. It's worthy of paying attention to it.
And I love what you just said. And, you can't fix a problem you can't see. We're going to go in depth and a number of other podcasts in the future on that. Being aware is more than just the physical protection of your well-being while you're in a public situation, right? Being aware, it encompasses all areas of your life. Am I not performing? Why is my boss at work being super upset with me every day? Is it because he's got a pretty crappy home life that's going on? Or is there really something that I need to be aware of in terms of my performance? So many people get blindsided by things at work, by things in their family. All of a sudden their wife just hands them divorce papers and they're like, oh, what happened? Well, you know what? If your wife handed you divorce papers and you didn't see it coming, then you need to work on your situational awareness, right? There's a whole bunch of signs that she was giving over the last few months, few years, whatever, that were leading up to that moment. This isn't just about protecting yourself from physical violence in a back alley. This is about being aware of everything in your life that there are key indicators that will tell you before you get served those divorce papers, before you get fired from your job, before you get, rammed on the freeway, whatever it is. There's so many things that you can be aware of. I mean, situational awareness for me when I'm driving is, I can't tell you, this is funny. One of my ex-wives, I used to just mess just to make a point, I would take the rear view mirror and I would move it off just to prove that she was driving for 15 minutes without ever seeing what was behind her, right? My point was she was not being aware of what's going on. When I can't tell you how many times where I've been in a situation where I'm on the freeway and all of a sudden somebody's there, Paul, that's the exit up there. I can very comfortably and confidently make the quick turns to get to that exit. Why? Because I already know always where those cars are. I'm not being hyper, but I'm every 30 seconds or so, I'm looking in that mirror. I know that car's coming up pretty fast. I know that car is just sitting there. I know he's sitting in my blind spot. Why? Because I saw him come into that blind spot, right? I don't have, and then if in a situation, an emergency happens where I have to go to my hard skills of driving, well, I can deal with it so much better because I'm aware of what's going on. I know what's happening in those mirrors. I know where all the other cars are on the freeway. Same thing in your relationships, same thing at work, same thing with your children. I wish I had more situational awareness when my kids were young so that I could have identified some of the signs of, hey, this needs to be worked on this relationship. This is something you need to be aware of. I talk about this a lot with families in their children. I say, people will leave the movie Sound of Freedom and they'll say, oh, I want to do something. I'm going to go out. I'm going to go rescue children in Colombia. No, you're going to get shot and you're probably going to get arrested. The best thing you can do is go home and hug your children. And they're like, how's that going to fix it? Well, you need to have a relationship with your children. This is soft skills. This is stuff before I have to go beat up some guy who raped my child, right? Before that happens, the soft skills, the preventative measures are, I need a relationship with my children for they can very easily come to me and say, hey, Dad, hey, Mom, I don't like it when I have to hug this uncle because, he's touches me weird and he says sexual things to me, whatever, or this babysitter's making me feel uncomfortable because she's suggesting that we watch pornography or she says that we have secrets outside of you, or, this friend, or this is what happened at school, whatever it is, having these awarenesses of grooming behaviors of adults around your young children, or awareness also of emotional changes with your kids that you can all of a sudden realize, wow, you know what? I don't think that's just my 12-year-old daughter going through puberty. I think that there's something more here. This is all awareness that can keep your children safe and prevent the unthinkable from happening in our own families. And it happens all the time. Literally, you can go out on your front porch and you can look left, you can look right. There's a very high chance that one of those homes is a dangerous place for children, right? You need to be aware of those signs. You need to have situational awareness of that, keeping your children safe from sexual harm, keeping your family safe from physical harm, keeping your job safe from you doing something stupid, keeping your marriage safe. So these are all things, there's so many areas of our life that this can be applied to. But as you said, if we're not aware that there's a problem or a potential problem, then we have no ability to do anything about it. We will literally live our lives with our heads in the sand like an ostrich, hoping that the danger will pass by. It's not. We're blessed as humans to have this frontal cortex, to have the ability to reason, to pay attention to things that typical animal life is not able to, and to make assessments based on that information that can reach out a year, 5 years, 10 years in the future and make a dramatic change in your life.
You hit on two very key points in the world of situational awareness. And most people think, oh yeah, just, sit your back to the wall and look around. That is not situational awareness. In fact, that's at the very bottom of the social. A key component is communication. Are you aware of what people are communicating with you? For example, are your kids telling you something you need to know, but you're just not attuned to that communication, what they're trying to say? Is your spouse or family member trying to tell you something? That communication piece is critical. The other thing is the visual thing. So communication is absolutely, we can get back to that later. There's a lot more to that. However, the visual thing, like you said, you hear the increase in the noise in the group and stuff like that. But the visual, how many times have you, speaking of the driving, when you're telling me about your wife, when you're driving, how many times have you looked at your watch to see what time it is and then looked at it again, right? We're all guilty of that, right? The first time you looked at it, you put your eyeballs on it, but you didn't see it. So the reason why you didn't see it is because you weren't there. There's a tremendous difference between looking and seeing. It's imperative that you, in fact, Ralph Waldo Emerson, it's not what you look at that matters, it's what you see, right? So being trained to see, and for you to see, you must engage your mind with your environment, including your family members, the people around you, engaging your mind with your communication, engaging your mind with your surroundings, what your immediate situation is presenting to you. You have to be engaged mentally.
Absolutely. In fact, I use that when like remembering names. For a long time, I'd be in public situations and somebody would tell me their name and I was not present. I was thinking about whatever else I was going to say and I didn't hear their name. But by taking just 2 seconds, when he said my name is Bill, I imagine, and sorry, Bills that are out there, I imagine him having a duck bill, right? It's just a quick hook, right? Or I connect him with it. Somebody says, my name is Fred. I think about a Fred that I know and I connect to them, and the facial features, whatever it is. I just take literally just a second. These skills don't take hours and hours and hours of your time. It's a couple seconds of being very present to pay attention to what's going on.
However, like anything, if you want to get good at it, you have to practice it. It's not a one and done. Once you learn, I want to learn a specific soft skill, then being able to repeat that soft skill. And the more you do it, as you know, perfect practice makes perfect. And being able to apply it, the greater your ability to apply your soft skills, it decreases the need for the hard skills.
Exactly. And it'll become almost subconscious. I remember the very first Jason Bourne movie, very early on when you're trying to understand who he is and whatever else, when he's trying to figure out who he is. He's like, he's in the restaurant with a girl and he said, I know the license plates of the cars. I know that the very best car to find keys is probably that pickup truck. It's probably got the keys that are in the visor. I know that the guys that are sitting at the bar, I know that the guy right there is probably the one who can handle himself the most. This guy could take him. He subconsciously, literally, they had spent millions and millions and millions of dollars training him as the ultimate weapon. And how did they train him? Most of it was awareness. Most of it was being able to control his mind and be hyper aware of what was really going on in his world around him. So,
in my world, those folks that are trained to that level is greater than 90, closer to 95% soft skills.
Yeah,
to solve technical problems because you're in a denied area. You're in a place you're not supposed to be. You are most likely without a weapon and without resources or any type of a quick reactionary force of any kind whatsoever. So you can rely on only one thing to stay safe and to accomplish your objectives, and that is apply your soft skills.
Yeah, and you've trained literally the best of the best, the very best of the best. In fact, you have a term for some of these guys that are beyond the best of the best called secret squirrels. Is that what you call them?
That's
explain what that is.
It's not my term. It's in the industry. A lot of guys throw it around. In fact, they have a little patch. I have a little squirrel with a hat on. So a secret squirrel is basically someone who's got more clearances than Clarence, that's completely undercover, and you can't know anything about him. He kind of blends into the wallpaper kind of guy. That's very highly trained, very experienced, and that's out there that kind of sort of doesn't exist but does.
Yeah. Well, and to be that person who kind of sort of doesn't exist but does, the soft skill training is through the roof. That's really what it's all about, is just being super aware of different people, different cultures, different everything. And you've lived all around the world. You have studied with the grand masters of almost every modality in terms of self-defense and understanding these. This is what makes you one of the best trainers on the planet. in some of these skills. And this is why I'm super excited to have you. And I could bring on, I had some former 3-letter agency guys just the other week that were on. You're the trainer of the trainers is kind of the reason why I loved training with Joseph Khalid in Krav Maga. He wasn't just a Krav guy who had a little studio. Joseph was the trainer of the trainers. He was one of the few people that was qualified to go back to Israel and train the other Krav Maga trainers. He was one of the only non-Israelis that was qualified at that level. And so, when we are putting our lives in danger and doing this undercover work and stuff, we had to be trained by the very, very best. And that's what I love about you, is that you are the guy who trains the very best that we know, because of the fact that you've been doing this for almost 4 decades. And I honor you for your service and for the lives that you have saved and for the good people everywhere that you have made a big difference. And that's why I'm super excited. You've trained over 50,000 people in all of your individual trainings over the last 40 years. That's a lot. Here, my goal is to help bring some of these tools to millions of people and get your name out there, because there's so many good families after watching Sound of Freedom, they leave the movie and they feel a little bit helpless. They're like, no, all that did is just make me more scared, right? No, I don't want people to leave the movie being more scared. I don't want you to be a helicopter mom and literally have to drive your kids to, the church house that was 3 doors away type thing. I don't want you to be that level of fear-based in your raising your kids. But if I can help these parents learn very specific skills that are very effective. They've been effective with these 3-letter agencies, with the top, the people who are going into some of the darkest, most dangerous places in the world. You can train them. There's definitely information that families can use to keep their kids safe.
And this is why, it's so important, people who ask about, what can I do and what are some options and things like that, especially with the movie, Sound of Freedom, you have presented an awareness. Hey, this is what's going on out there. And now people are looking at that going, well, okay, good. Now I know I can see what's going on. Now what the next logical question, what can I now do about that? Well, you can be proactive rather than relying on your skills and services and tremendous abilities. How about be proactive so as to prevent something like that from happening? In fact, I'd like to go into a little bit about the whole start of preventive defense and start pre-defense.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're kind of throwing the word around. What does that mean, right? So preventive defense. It's your first line of defense. It's the proactive measures that you take so you don't need to get into the self-defense and the rescue missions and things like that. So it's my whole career has been, dealing with training folks for very bad situations where they have to react with a hand-to-hand or a weapon of some kind, firearm, whatever it may be. And of those many, many tens of thousands of folks that I've worked with, I always get to hear their stories, which is fascinating. Everybody's got an incredible story, like that you wouldn't believe. Like they could write their own books, right? And they'll say, well, such and such an incident happened to me, and then I needed to do this, and so I responded by doing this, and everything was hard skills related. And it got me thinking, okay, so there you were all of a sudden in a bad situation, and it occurred to me, you know what? Bad situations just don't all of a sudden occur out of the blue. You're not beamed in from some whatever situation. They gradually, events occur in such a manner as to unfold into eventually a physical violence situation. But those events leading up to that are what are the majority of things you can observe prior to finding yourself in a physical altercation. So I started to switch modes and change my lens to look prior to, okay, yeah, here's this really bad thing that happened, and it was bad, but what happened before that? And I would ask the questions, before that, I never really noticed that guy was over there and that he had been talking to my girlfriend and things, so I start to peel back the layers as you go back and back and back and back and back. And it turns out that, putting the numbers to it, and I won't bore our audience with that right now, but 0 to about 90+% are those events that occur prior to, leading up to the physical violence. So if you can solve that problem prior, that's your soft skills. That's being proactive. If you have to and are forced into reactive measures, that means you're back on your heels. You fail to observe a 90% of the equation ahead of it in which you could have solved the problem there. And that is the birth of preventive defense, or what we call prefense.
Love that. Give us some examples of, there's, of course, thousands and thousands of different cues and whatnot. But, as a parent, what are some examples of some preventative defense type things that they could be aware of?
Sure. There's an entire section on prefense for schools. And one of the most effective is you're a parent and you're allowed to talk to the administration at the school and you're allowed to ask them questions. And one of the things we recommend often is ask the questions of those proactive measures. What measures do you have in place to ensure the safety of this learning environment? And they'll say, well, we have doors that lock, and we have a police officer. Yeah, those are reactive measures. What are your proactive measures? And have them explain those to you in detail. For example, access control. When a parent comes up to a school, they're funneled into a specific area that is well controlled. They let their kids out and they move away, that kind of. So those procedures, the standard operating procedures of the learning environment, are an example of what you would consider to be a proactive measure. But your administrator should be able to list for you all the way down to the teachers in the classroom, starting from the parking lot to the seat that your child is in, and what the teacher's responsibilities and roles are.
Got it. I remember one of my operations, the trafficker. We were in Mexico. We were in a beach area in Mexico, and it was over New Year's, and my girlfriend at the time was kind of bugged that I was going to be gone doing an undercover operation over New Year's. Right? She's like, "What am I going to do over New Year's?" I'm like, "Oh crap!" So, I decided to fly her down. I said, "Listen, we're operating in this area. I don't want anybody near that area, but we're going to get a little resort. You can have a hotel there." And she decided to bring her cousin with her. Her cousin was 18, but she looked like a younger teenager and whatnot. And there was one of the traffickers that we had met with named Victor. He was selling children as young as 7 years old. He told us, he said, I can go to this city, Tenancinga. I can pick up couple 7-year-olds. You pay me $5,000 to go there, pay me $2,500 a month, and I'll keep them for you to use anytime you want. This was a really bad man. And he showed me on his phone, his menu of other girls, that some of them that he physically had, other ones he had access to with some other traffickers, etc. He was showing me these, and they ranged from 7 years old all the way up to 18, 19, 20, even some older than 18, but they were being trafficked. They were being controlled by him as a pimp. And what was interesting is that my girlfriend's cousin, who was with us, they had been down there for a couple days. They were just kind of playing around, and they were posting a bunch of stuff on their social media. And it was obvious that they were somewhat unaccompanied, because there was no pictures of me there or anything, just a couple beautiful young girls that were there. And this younger one, her cousin, had got approached by Victor, by this trafficker. And he said, "Hey, I see you guys are in Cancun," because they weren't being aware that predators literally look online and are able to filter through, especially if you're tagging your location. He had a system where he was identifying anybody who was tagging the location in the Cancun area. He would look through them and find the ones that looked like they were not being supervised. There were young girls without parents or whatnot, and he would reach out to them. And he said, "Hey, I'm a guide. I have a boat. I love to take you guys on a free trip out to this island. We can spend some time, provide some drinks and whatever else. This was a verified trafficker that was selling me children as young as 7 years old that was reaching out. So if parents don't have the soft skills, the situational awareness to number one, make sure that their kids don't have an open source social media where anybody can see it, just limiting it just to their friends. And also number two, being aware of who they're talking to, whether it's on their gaming platforms that they're being approached by adults that are pretending like they're kids, or in this situation, a verified trafficker that reaches out saying, hey, I'm a guide and whatnot. So these are all things that if an uninformed parent, if an unaware parent was not paying attention to what was going on and didn't tell the kids, hey, you need to pay attention to that, that could very easily be a very dangerous situation for girls like that are being contacted. He very well may have, if they were, other girls that weren't connected with me, very well may have taken away their passports and drugged them and, brought them into that situation. And then the parents are like, my kids went to Mexico. I don't know where they are. This happens all the time. And so, being aware of what's going on social media, being aware of the people your kids are talking to, being aware of your friends of your kids. My wife says that her mom always said, you tell me who your friends are and I tell you who you are, or I'll tell you where you're going to be. You should know the names of your kids' friends. You should know the parents of your kids' friends. You should know where they live. You should know what your kids are doing, and not being, like I say, you don't want to be a helicopter dad. You don't want to deal with them in fear, but having that level of awareness goes so far in keeping your kids safe.
You hit on another key point in our world, what's called InfoSec, which is short for information security. So when you post something on the internet, let me give you a real world story. So we had one of our friends, his wife's girlfriend, gets on the internet and she puts in, we just bought this great home entertainment system, and she goes through the whole, shows every picture of every room in the house. And this is our safe room where we keep all of our jewelry and all this stuff. And then she goes, and here's our big speaker system, our 79-inch TV. She goes into all this detail. And then she finishes with, but we're so sorry we're not going to be able to enjoy it right away because we're going to be leaving the country for 3 months and nobody's going to be here at the house.
Dear.
That is an example of InfoSec, right? Yeah. Information security. You breach it. So you're in total control of the information that you put out there, whether it's verbal. That's why, you go to a hotel in the U.S. and most places in the world where they're not allowed to say your room number. They put it on a piece of paper and slide it across the table. You go to to check out and they ask for your phone number. Show them on your phone. Don't, those kind of things, little small things like that. But you're in complete control of the information that you put out, whether it's physical or digital.
I hate to admit this, but back when I was single, I remember being in a grocery line behind this really cute girl. And he says, what's your phone number? And she blurted it out. I memorized it right there. Right? I wasn't a predator, but you can see how easy it would be if there was, a predator in line and whatnot, that was, all right, now they have all of a sudden have that phone number, that girl, they could, follow her out to the car and text her and whatever else and really, really create some problems. Exactly. So, yeah.
That's the whole point of maintaining that control of that information.
Talk to me about normalcy bias.
So normalcy bias is a state of being that your mind replaces what's really going on, that everything's okay. There's a little story I always use when I teach, and it's of the story of these two little frogs in a pot of water, and they have they have cigars and ice cream, and they're talking about the game. They got the sunglasses on, and so to them, they're in a jacuzzi and. Their minds are telling them this is great, it's nice and warm, we're watching the game, but in reality, they get cooked. So that's the same thing. Here's some real world examples. There was a really bad plane crash some years ago, and as the plane was on the ground, some people survived, some didn't. What happened was that their minds told them that this was part of the flight experience, and there's pictured photographs of the people who didn't make it with their fingers crossed, smiling, looking out the window. And there were other folks who they had paid attention. Okay, go down here, take a left to get off the plane. So this one guy, I told you that you saw the presentation where he picked up his wife and they immediately exited the aircraft at the right time. And they looked back and saw the other folks who had been victimized by this normalcy bias, where their minds were telling me, oh, because they've never experienced this before, it's new, it's unfamiliar, and it's threatening. So your mind needs to work through all that. Well, you've never seen a plane on fire before. You're unfamiliar with what to do in that situation, and it's, of course, threatening. So those three things are what cause and impact you as a result of normalcy bias.
Yeah, it's your brain pretending like everything's okay when it's not.
Because we want to feel, every human wants to feel that everything's good.
Yeah.
That's our natural propensity. However, when things aren't and you're still in that mode, that's a problem. That's normalcy bias.
I taught my kids that, if the power goes out and, all the lights are out and in your section of the neighborhood, that's okay. If somebody hit a power line, that's not a big deal. If the lights go out in the whole city, that's a problem. If the lights go out in the whole city and your cell phone's not working, now that's a bigger problem. Those are signs that something like an EMP went off. And in a situation like that, you've got 3 days worth of food in your city. You've got 9 meals away from anarchy before things get very, very dangerous in every major city in the country. These are all examples of, okay, how do I take a look at really what's going on and be aware that things could get significantly worse very, very quickly based on that awareness. And how to, again, not live in fear, but live in a place of awareness. So that I like to think of it like this. I describe this in my book. In fact, I talk about a lot of these things in my book, the situational awareness, everything else. But I talk about how years ago I read a book by Stephen R. Covey, and he has a number of different books, a lot of different seminars and whatnot. But I remember being at a seminar where he was teaching, and he drew 2 circles. He said, here's your circle of influence and your circle of concern. He said, and most people have a really big circle of concern. What if somebody kidnaps my kid at school? What if Kim Jong-un drops a nuke on us? What if, all these what ifs that just give them anxiety all the time, right? Worry. But they're not doing anything about it. Why? Because their circle of influence is still pretty small, right? They really haven't done anything to ensure that safety of their kids. They haven't taken the time to learn, defense, prefense type skills that can alleviate a lot of that. So I after that seminar, I made a decision for me personally that those 2 circles are going to be the same size. Meaning, if something comes into my circle of concern, I have 2 choices. Either I can push it out, say, okay, I'm not going to put any mental energy into that. I'm not going to use up all this stress and anxiety and make me an angry, upset person by having this in my circle of concern. I'm going to push it out. Or if it keeps coming in and it's something that I can't effectively push out of my circle of concern, then my other choice is I simply increase my circle of influence to encapsulate anything that's in that concern. Right? So when I realized that unequivocally we live in a world where there are people that would hurt children, there are people that would harm others because of their lust for sex and money and everything else. When I realized that there are people that act in a way differently than I would, because of whatever circumstances, that whatever decisions they made in their life, that's an irrelevant thing. The reality is there are dangerous people out there. There are dangerous people for us. There's dangerous people for our children. There is situations that we need to be aware of. There are things that are in my circle of concern that I can't just stupidly put out of it and say that's not going to happen, right? And so I made a conscious choice to learn the skills necessary, those soft skills, the situational awareness skills, even the hard skills, in case it ever got to that point, to put the time into being aware of those things, not so that I could live in fear, so that I could live in peace. I live every day in a state of peace. I really do. Why? Because I know that there is nothing that's currently in my circle of concern that I haven't done something to increase my ability to deal with it, that circle of influence.
And you made a really good point about the difference between, people think, well, I don't want to be paranoid. Well, it's not paranoid. It's preparedness. There's a difference between paranoid is looking under every desk and every, that's a mental illness. And there's two types of people in the world, those who are prepared and those who are not. And if you're prepared, that means you're trained. If you're unprepared, you're untrained. And if you look at, your average law enforcement professional or someone along those lines, protective services professional, people like that, they go about, they're completely aware of their surroundings, but they're not in any way stressed about it. They're not, they're not overly concerned about it because, like you said, they have the training. So with training comes confidence, and that confidence is what gives you peace of mind. Oh, if such and such a thing happens, I'm going to do this. But you also have not only confidence, but control of your environment. So being trained in your soft skills gains you the control, right? So you can either be controlled by the situation or control the situation. And that's basically the difference is, are you trained to manage it or not?
Tell us more about what mental toughness is in your courses and what that means and how somebody can get to that point of feeling like they have that mental toughness.
Sure. So it starts with how you view it. We use the term mindset. What's your mindset? The most common mindset I've run into all over the planet after all these decades is, it's never going to happen to me. Okay. So if you believe it's never going to happen to you, and when it does, that's T-bone. I mean, you just got blindsided because, you didn't even think the possibility was there. The next mindset would be, next most common mindset is those folks who say, well, that's what we pay our first responders for. So, I mean, isn't that what cops are for? If something bad happens, I call the police. Okay, I guess it's a little better than it's never going to happen to me. But then the third mindset that you can adopt is, it's my responsibility. My personal security and my family and their safety is my responsibility. Well, just think what that does compared to the other two. It then puts you in a position of control, right? So that's one mental aspect of it. And then there's other pieces to the puzzle, but those are if you don't start with that, if you don't accept that level of responsibility and that bad things do happen to good people and it could happen to you, it's your responsibility. That's your baseline.
And that's so powerful. Accepting responsibility is one of the most empowering things you can do on every aspect, not just on the defense side and the protection side, but in your family and your work and every aspect of your life. The most disempowering thing that you can do is blame. The second that you blame, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if all of the evidence say that person was to blame. The second that you push that out there and release that responsibility is the second that you lose the ability to do something about it. Now, I'm not talking about blaming yourself. That's a whole different thing. Blame to somebody else and blaming yourself are both negative emotions. Responsibility for that person and responsibility for me are both positive. And so it's so important to look at everything in your life and say, okay, how could have I handled that situation differently? How can I take responsibility for that? What do I need to do moving forward in this area with my children, this area with my job, this area with my addictions, whatever it is? How can I take responsibility to move forward, become the very best version of me that I can be in every area? It's so empowering. And, I always tell people that blame, when you're pointing your finger at somebody else, you've got 3 pointing back at you, right?
That's good. That's really good.
So that's how I like to look at it. The very second that I point here, I've got to look at those 3 fingers that are pointing back at me and realize, there's probably 3 times the amount of stuff that I could have done if I took responsibility for that. And that makes me be able to empowers me. It empowers me to be the best version of me I can be.
You hit it on the head again. When you relinquish your responsibility, you give up control. That's So there's a relationship there. In fact, I studied with the masters, as you know, and they talk about there's the physical training, there's the mental training, and this is part of the philosophical side of the fence. And the mental training is that, yes, when you take responsibility, then you realize that you need to increase your knowledge about or training or background or something that you can, okay, now I can use this tool. So I'm responsible for this, and here are the tools I need. So I gain knowledge, I gain wisdom from applying that knowledge. So you have the responsibility, you have the knowledge, and those two pieces of the puzzle give you better control of your environment. So if you take away the training or take away the responsibility, then you're not controlling your environment is controlling you.
Love that. That leads into my next question on defining the difference between being a soft target and a hard target. I told the audience in my interview just a few weeks ago, in fact, a couple of them, one with Andy and then another one with a three-letter agency, a friend of mine, talked about how they've done studies of guys who are in prison for big time predators, and they would show different pictures, different videos of people that are walking in public situations, and they would ask them who's the soft target, who would you go after, and almost every time, a myriad of different predators identified the same people as a soft target. So walk us through the difference between a soft and a hard target, and some different things that make somebody a soft target versus things that make them a hard target.
Sure. That initial study that you're talking about is called the Rollaway experiment, and that was done many, many, many years ago, and they've built up upon it from there. And so what they do is they'll either show photos or videos, and they'll go through and they'll say, oh, that's a soft target, that's a hard target. First, let's define which is which. So a soft target would be someone that appears to be, very weak or an easy prey, and, bad guys go after easy targets. It's one of those rules of life. So if you look soft, then that's like a magnet. They're going to be attracted to you. So let me give you some more details on hard target. So I have a good example. When as you know, I worked for the CIA, and when I got out of that position, I continued to stay in the field of protection. And as part of that, I would work with various agencies, and one of them was a corporation that had activities going on overseas, and he had one of the principals of the organization asked me to interview his family at his personal compound that he had, and asked me to interview his spouse. And we'll call her Ms. Smith for now, because, to protect the innocent, right? So now Ms. Smith, her husband has been away. He's travels and lives pretty much overseas, so she never sees him. And she's got the most difficult job in the world, which is raising 3 kids pretty much by herself. No military background, no law enforcement. She wasn't a secret squirrel. And so I asked her, I said, so Ms. Smith, could you please explain to me, how you bring the kid, what's your technique to bring the kids out of the store or whatever, and put them into the minivan? And I have my clipboard because I'm supposed to take notes and, relay this to Mr. Smith. So she goes into this thing. She goes, well, first I have little Johnny. He opens the door. You only want to have one choke point, right? And I'm taking notes like, yeah. And she goes into this incredible description of how she tactically moves the kids into the minivan. It would have brought a tear of joy to the eye of a small unit commander. And so she gets him. So I said, okay, Ms. Smith, all right, you've got everybody in the car, and let's say you're in a parking garage at the supermarket, and they're in the car and they're all strapped in and they're baby seats and everything. And this group of 5 guys come up to the front of the minivan with a gun, a knife, baseball bat, and they want to hurt you and the kids. Before I could even finish the sentence, she says, well, I would just simply hit that little skinny pedal to the right and smash them into the garage wall. Smash them into the garage wall. Right? So we had this long interview, and then she said, I noticed, I walked into this one store. She's telling me where the kids were near the carriage, the shopping cart and all that. She says, and I noticed this creepy guy at the front of the store. Her term, creepy guy. She says, and she makes this plan. If he's still there when I'm done shopping, I'm going to have the manager walk me and the kids out. So just those 3 incidents alone, how she tactically moves the kids into the vehicle, how she was, her mindset, her will to solve a tactical problem using the little skinny pedal on the right and making a plan. My question is, are there softer targets? Yes, there are some.
Yeah, for sure.
Ms. Smith.
She's a hard target.
Ms. Smith is a hard target.
Yeah.
And she was. I mean, she was tough as rusted roofing nails.
Yeah. And again, you can do that without breeding fear into your kids.
No.
It's simply situational awareness. They're super happy. And I'm sure that little Johnny, when he's opening the door and putting them all in, it's fun. He's like, this is my job. This is how we get to do this.
Yes, he loves it. They're laughing and playing. No stress, no seriousness,
Yeah.
And when you have to live your life, you can't be living in fear. So like you said, living in control, but, enjoying life. That's the balance.
Yeah. Well, and her story about pushing the little pedal on the right, the willingness to match force for force is super important. I remember when I was doing training with Joseph in Krav Maga, and I would bring in a bunch of my friends and some of my investors in the fund and stuff, just because I had trained for years, and this would be a fun way for me to create relationships with them, and also for them to learn some real skills. I remember John would tell me, he'd say, "Paul, why don't you take your investors golfing?" I said, well, first of all, I can barely make it through a miniature golf game, let alone 4 hours on a green. I said, and secondly, I love this stuff. I love this awareness training. I love these defense training. I love this stuff because it gave me confidence in any situation, and this is a great way for me to build relationships with our investors and our donors, et cetera. So I would have events where I'd bring them together, and I remember one where Joseph, he said this many times, but as a big group of newbies, they hadn't really had any training before, and he said, guys, all right, so question for you, if you're in a situation where 100% that your family's in danger, a guy broke into your house, he's got a knife, he's got a gun, he's gonna rape your wife, he's gonna steal your kids, he's gonna whatever it is. This is a very dangerous person, right? And you're in a scuffle with him. He's coming to try to take you down. How many of you can visually see yourself sticking your finger in their eye and ripping out their eyeball? And very few hands went up. They're like, the thought of gouging somebody's eye like that was difficult for somebody to visualize. And he said, you need to get over that, or else nothing else will work. Hopefully you'll have learned a bunch from this podcast where you'll never get to the point where you have to use that physical force. But if you do, if you're in that position where 90% of the signs have gone by, or somebody just broke into your house and there was nothing you could do to be aware of that situation beforehand, how many people would be willing to match force for force, escalate it to the point, just like I did when we were in the black alley with the traffickers? I had to be willing to boom, because I knew, okay, I missed a bunch of stuff. I didn't text one of the federal agents to have them casually walk down the street back there. I missed a bunch of things. I missed the fact that these guys probably saw me walking into there, and I missed the fact that we're in a dark alley. I missed some things. I had to do that quick escalation, and being willing to do so, I think, was super important.
Well, your willingness was built on you're taking the responsibility. So you can't have willingness without responsibility.
Yeah.
That's the base. You have to accept the responsibility.
And I had to be aware of the fact that, oh crap, now we're in a place we need to deal with, On top of that, things got even worse on that. So they turned around, which was fine, which is great. Now we're walking down this alley with this trafficker, and he turns the corner, now goes down another alley, so you can't even see the main road from this other alley. And this is in a rough neighborhood. I mean, you've seen what's happening in Ecuador now with the gangs running everything and trying to take over the government. It's been a mess for a little while now. And we were dealing with humanity's worst, people that are selling 8, 9, 10-year-old kids, right? So he takes us down the second alley, and there was this building. And unfortunately, guys, hopefully you'll never make the stupid decisions to be in these kind of positions, but when we're undercover, we had to put ourselves in some pretty dangerous places, right? So this trafficker, there's this building, it was solid brick. There's no windows at all on the front of this building, and it was mashed up against two buildings on either side, so there's no windows on the side. This was a completely bricked off building, and he sticks a key in this steel door and opens the steel door, and he asks us to come in. We come in, he turns around and sticks a key in and locks it from the inside. So it wasn't a push and buck lock, it was a keyed lock from the inside, steel door, bricks everywhere. Now we're locked inside of a building with whoever is in there. And he said, you guys wait here. I'm going to go get what you're looking for upstairs just so I can show you that I have what your boss wants, right? So we hear him going up the stairs, and we hear some rustling. And Jimmy, my operator who's with me, he turns to me, and this is, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to have situational awareness. We were aware we were in a situation, right? So Jimmy turns to me, he said, Paul, one of two things is going to happen in the next few minutes. Either we're going to get the shit beat out of us, and this is a really dangerous place, or he's going to come downstairs with some real trafficked children who, even if they escaped whatever's upstairs, they can't get out of the building because it's got locked with a key from the inside. And sure enough, a few minutes later, he came down with some of the children that he had shown us on his menu earlier, and we geotagged that location. The feds were able to hit it just a few days later and rescue those kids. But I don't know how that has to do with situational awareness, other than that's the rest of the story of being in that outrage. So
your awareness heightens, and remember you had talked about earlier you were going to cover the color codes. So you started out.
I would love that. Why don't we do that now? Why don't you go teach people about the color codes, where it starts, where it goes from, and what each one of them means, and how our energy and our awareness changes in each one.
Sure. This was originally codified by Colonel Jeff Cooper. He's one of the guys I trained with many years ago, and World War II vet. And he codified the conditions of our human awareness he attached a color to a level of awareness. So, for example, you're at home, you're watching TV, with your family, you've got bars on the windows, you have, the alarm is set, it's your castle, your awareness level can be pretty low. What he calls condition white. You leave the humble abode and you're into general public. The recommendation is, and all law enforcement and protective services personnel will click it up from condition white to condition yellow, which is a general awareness where you're applying your mind to your environment. You're engaging your mind with your environment, not just looking around, but engaging yourself with your environment. It's the second look to the watch. That's condition yellow. Condition orange would be clicking up that personal radar one more level, and that would be a specific threat, like Ms. Smith when she saw that, quote, creepy guy at the supermarket. That's a specific threat. And then you were in it. You were in condition red because it can't get any worse. Well, it could get worse. But you're at the highest you can get, the heightened aspect of awareness at that level, condition red. So those colors each represent a different level of awareness.
Yeah. Well, and you go into that, all of these things, you go into it a bunch more in your Prefense course. And,
yes.
and we're at about an hour now. I want to throw a couple things out. Guys, if you like this as much as I do, I want you to share it. I want you to click like and comment. Let us know the things that we talked about today that you would like to go more on. We could literally do an entire podcast on almost each one of these things. Steve's had almost 40 years of training that he's trained other people in all of these techniques, one of the absolute best on the planet. And so you go into depth on them in your Prefense course. In fact, we've put your Prefense course on Liberating Humanity. Guys, you can go to liberatinghumanity.com or liberating-humanity.com, whichever you want, and go onto the Prefense course. And hold on, let me see what it is. Use the code LIBERATE20 with a capital L, LIBERATE20 you can get 20% off of the Preventive course. I didn't do this whole podcast just to pitch you something, but I know that a lot of you are looking for something more. You're looking for detailed information, how-to videos, and details of what you can do in each one of these things to empower yourself so that you can protect your family, protect yourself, and be aware in these situations. This isn't hard stuff. You're not going to have to go spend 20 years in a dojo to learn these skills. This is stuff that is going to take some of your time, but it's going to make a massive difference in your life. In fact, the first part of the Sound of Freedom book, the first section is called The Making of an Undercover Operator. And the reason I named it that is this is simply training that I've had from Steve, from Joseph, from all these other guys that I touch on a bunch of this stuff in the book. Things that you can do, hands-on things that you can do to keep you and your family safe. Any other final things that you want to kind of throw out about Preventive, about what you're doing and what we're doing, creating the future together on this?
Well, I get a lot of the same questions. What can I do? Well, you can be proactive. The more proactivity, then the less reactivity. The more time you put in awareness and raising your awareness and raising your consciousness of these things that could happen, you have three choices. It's never going to happen to me. Someone else is going to handle it, or it's my responsibility.
Yeah, I love that. And I think responsibility is the name of the game here. If we can step in, take responsibility for our lives, our families, our future, even our past, take responsibility for that, then and only then do we have the ability to move forward and progress. So we talked about, on our ride here from the airport, we talked about how, yes, humanity has grown so much in the last few hundred years in terms of technology, et cetera. But in terms of how we are reacting to each other, the fact that humans are still killing other humans, that we haven't progressed much at all, have we?
I asked my masters, I said, where would you put humanity on a football field grid, from the 0-yard line to 100? Where are we? And he turns around and says, you're barely behind the first blade of grass at the 0-yard line.
We have a long ways to go.
We got a ways to go.
Yep. And guys, I think that sums it up. That's what liberating humanity is all about. Liberating ourselves from fear, from addictions, PTSD, anxiety, depression, from having a dysfunctional family, from failing at work, all of these things, from our wars, from our divisions, from our hatred. All of this is such toxic energy that toxic energy is what is creating things like child trafficking. When I started going down this road, my goal was to eradicate child trafficking. And I realized that I was never going to do it just doing the undercover work because we were fighting fire with fire. Literally, we were at that code red. We were at the hard skills. The child had already been taken. That child was already being trafficked, was already being abused. So I had to ask myself, okay, if everything else in my life, I'm taking a few steps back and I'm using things like Preventive to be aware so that I don't ever have to deal with some of those hard skills, what can we do with humanity as a whole? So that, because when you're fighting fire with fire, there's already been a fire. There's already things that got burned. And in this case, it's the children. It's the children. So let's together as good, healthy adults, let's figure out ways to prevent these things before they ever happen in the first place. So thank you. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Liberating Humanity. I hope you enjoyed it as much as me. We're going to have Steve on more. We're going to go into more depth in some of these things. Meanwhile, go to liberatinghumanity.com. Pre-order this book. It'll be out very soon. And go and learn more about Preventive and order Steve's course because you're going to love it. Thanks for joining us.